On a rain-soaked night, Marcus Washington wiped down the last table where a blonde woman had dined alone. She'd barely touched her expensive meal, then departed without leaving any tip. As Marcus lifted her pristine dinner plate, a folded note appeared beneath. The elegant handwriting contained an address that stunned him. A billionaire left no tip, but hidden underneath was an invitation that could transform his and his daughter's entire future. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of the two-bedroom apartment at 5:30 in the morning, but Marcus Washington was already awake. He had been staring at the water stain on the ceiling for the past 20 minutes, calculating numbers that never seemed to add up. Rent was due in 5 days, Zoe's school tuition payment loomed next week, and the electricity bill sat unopened on the kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. At 32, Marcus had grown accustomed to these pre-dawn mathematics sessions, where hope wrestled with reality in the dim light filtering through their apartment's single window. He rolled out of bed quietly, his muscular frame moving with practiced stealth to avoid waking his 8-year-old daughter in the next room. The floorboards creaked under his weight, despite his careful steps. Another reminder of their modest circumstances in the subsidized housing complex on the south side of town. Marcus paused at Zoe's doorway, watching her sleep peacefully, clutching the worn teddy bear that had belonged to her mother. Sarah's absence still echoed through their lives 3 years after cancer had stolen her away, leaving Marcus to navigate single parenthood while juggling multiple jobs to keep their small family afloat. The morning routine was a well-choreographed dance of efficiency. Coffee brewing in the second-hand machine, Zoe's school uniform laid out with military precision, lunch packed with whatever remained in their refrigerator after each grocery run. Marcus had mastered the art of stretching every dollar, turning simple ingredients into meals that would sustain them both through long days apart. He worked the morning shift at the Golden Oak, an upscale restaurant downtown where crystal stemware cost more than his monthly grocery budget, then rushed home to help Zoe with homework before heading to his evening security job. "Daddy, are you making pancakes again?" Zoe's sleepy voice drifted from her bedroom, followed by the soft padding of small feet across the carpet. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair a beautiful crown of tight curls that reminded Marcus so much of Sarah it sometimes took his breath away. Her school uniform hung perfectly pressed on her slight frame. Marcus had learned to iron with the same dedication he brought to everything else in their lives. "Not today, sweetheart. We're having cereal and fruit," Marcus replied, ruffling her hair as she climbed onto one of their mismatched kitchen chairs. "But I promise we'll have pancakes this weekend when I don't have to rush to work." The lie came easily now. He had been promising weekend pancakes for months, but extra shifts always seemed to take priority over leisurely breakfasts. Survival demanded sacrifice, and Marcus had learned to swallow his guilt along with his instant coffee. Zoe nodded solemnly, understanding more about their financial constraints than any child should. She had inherited her mother's intelligence along with her beauty, making honor roll consistently despite the challenges that came with their circumstances. Marcus watched her methodically eat her cereal, occasionally glancing at the stack of books she carried everywhere like precious treasures. Her teacher had mentioned that Zoe showed exceptional promise in mathematics and science, subjects that could open doors to scholarships and opportunities Marcus could barely imagine affording. The walk to Zoe's school took 15 minutes through neighborhoods that gradually improved with each block. A visual reminder of the social ladder Marcus was determined to help his daughter climb. He dropped her off with their usual goodbye ritual, a tight hug and a whispered "make good choices," before catching the bus downtown to the Golden Oak. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a gleaming office building where men in $1,000 suits discussed merger deals over wine that cost more than Marcus's weekly salary. At the Golden Oak, Marcus transformed into a different version of himself. His uniform was always pristine, his demeanor professional, his knowledge of the menu encyclopedic. He had studied wine pairings and food preparation techniques during late nights after Zoe fell asleep, determined to excel at every aspect of his job. The wealthy patrons rarely acknowledged him as more than a functional part of their dining experience, but Marcus took pride in anticipating their needs before they voiced them. He memorized preferences, dietary restrictions, and personal quirks of regular customers, treating each table as if their satisfaction was his personal mission. The morning shift began with setup, polishing silverware that gleamed under the restaurant's warm lighting, arranging fresh flowers that cost more than his daily wages, ensuring every surface met the exacting standards that justified the establishment's premium prices. Marcus worked alongside other servers, most of whom were younger, and treated their positions as temporary stops on paths to acting careers or graduate degrees. For Marcus, this job represented stability in an uncertain world, a steady paycheck that kept the lights on and food on their table. "Washington, you're taking table 12 today," announced Janet, the floor manager whose clipped tone suggested she had never worried about making rent. "It's a new client, supposedly some big shot from the financial district. Make sure everything's perfect." Marcus nodded, checking his appearance in the polished surface of a serving tray. His reflection showed a man who carried himself with quiet dignity despite circumstances that would have broken weaker spirits. The slight gray at his temples spoke to the stress of single parenthood, but his eyes still held the determination that had carried him through Sarah's illness and beyond. As the lunch crowd began arriving, Marcus fell into the familiar rhythm of service. He guided wealthy patrons to their tables, took orders with practiced efficiency, and navigated the delicate balance between attentiveness and invisibility that fine dining demanded. Some customers treated him with casual indifference, others with subtle condescension that reminded him of his place in their social hierarchy. Occasionally, someone would speak to him as if he were invisible, discussing business deals or personal matters as if he lacked the intelligence to understand their conversations. During his break, Marcus sat in the narrow alley behind the restaurant, eating a sandwich he had packed from home while other staff members complained about demanding customers or discussed their weekend plans. He pulled out his phone to check for messages from Zoe's school and found instead a text from his daughter. "Daddy, I got an A on my math test. Love you." The message filled him with a warmth that temporarily pushed aside his worries about bills and the future. Every sacrifice felt worthwhile when he saw his daughter thriving despite their challenges. The afternoon hours stretched ahead with more tables to serve, more smiles to maintain, more careful navigation of social dynamics that reminded him daily of the vast gulf between his dreams and his reality. Marcus had once imagined opening his own small cafe, a place where community mattered more than profit margins, but such dreams felt increasingly distant with each passing month. Still, he held on to hope that someday, somehow, an opportunity would present itself to break free from the cycle of barely getting by that had defined their lives since Sarah's death. The evening sky darkened ominously as Marcus began his second shift at the Golden Oak, thick clouds gathering like an audience preparing for drama. Rain had been threatening all afternoon, and the first droplets began striking the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows just as the dinner crowd started arriving. The weather seemed to amplify the usual tension between the opulent interior and the harsh realities waiting outside, creating an atmosphere where anything might happen. Marcus adjusted his tie and surveyed his assigned section, noting that table 7 remained empty, despite having a reservation for 7 o'clock. Thunder rumbled in the distance as a woman entered alone, shaking droplets from her simple black coat before the maitre d' escorted her to Marcus's section. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with striking blonde hair that caught the ambient lighting despite being slightly dampened by rain. Her beauty was undeniable yet understated, dressed in clothing that suggested quality without ostentation. Unlike most patrons who demanded immediate attention upon arrival, she settled into her chair quietly and began observing the restaurant's bustling activity with keen interest that seemed to focus on the staff rather than the lavish decor. Marcus approached her table with his practiced professional smile, water pitcher in hand and menu tucked under his arm. "Good evening. Welcome to the Golden Oak. I'm Marcus, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink while you look over our selection?" His voice carried the warm confidence he had perfected over years of serving demanding clientele. The woman looked up at him with unusually direct eye contact, studying his face with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable despite his experience with difficult customers. "I'll have the Chateau Margaux, please," she replied, naming a wine that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. "And I'd like to try your chef's tasting menu, but I'm not particularly hungry tonight. I'm more interested in watching how this place operates." Her request struck him as odd. Wealthy patrons typically focused on their companions or business discussions rather than restaurant operations. Marcus nodded professionally, though her comment planted a seed of curiosity about her motivations for dining alone on such an expensive evening out. As Marcus retrieved the bottle from the wine cellar, he noticed other servers discussing the mysterious woman at table 7. Jennifer whispered that she had seen the customer's Black American Express card during check-in, the kind reserved for individuals with unlimited spending power. Kevin mentioned overhearing her decline the maitre d's offer to seat her at a more prominent table, preferring instead to observe the dining room from her current vantage point. The woman's behavior deviated from typical patterns Marcus had observed among wealthy diners, creating an undercurrent of speculation among the evening staff. Throughout the dinner service, Marcus found himself stealing glances at table 7 between attending to his other customers. The blonde woman ate sparingly from each course, often pausing to watch how he interacted with different tables around the restaurant. She seemed particularly attentive when he served an elderly couple celebrating their anniversary, noting how he remembered their preference for extra lemon wedges and quietly arranged for a complimentary dessert. When he helped a frustrated businessman understand wine pairings, she observed his patient explanations despite the customer's condescending tone and obvious impatience with Marcus's measured responses. The woman's scrutiny intensified during a challenging interaction at table 9, where a group of young professionals had clearly enjoyed too much alcohol before dinner. Their conversation grew increasingly loud and inappropriate, with one member making dismissive comments about "these people" while gesturing vaguely toward Marcus and the other servers. Instead of escalating the situation, Marcus smoothly redirected their attention to dessert options while subtly signaling for management assistance. His handling of potential conflict drew an approving nod from the observant woman, though she quickly looked away when their eyes met across the crowded dining room. Rain began pelting the windows more forcefully as the evening progressed, creating a percussion that seemed to underscore the woman's mysterious presence. She declined offers for coffee or dessert, instead requesting her check while most other tables were still engaged in animated conversations. Marcus processed her payment efficiently, noting the understated elegance of her signature on the receipt. She left no tip, unusual for someone clearly capable of generous gratuities, but thanked him sincerely for excellent service before gathering her coat and stepping back into the storm. The remainder of Marcus's shift passed uneventfully, though he found his thoughts returning repeatedly to the enigmatic diner and her peculiar behavior. Her absence of gratuity stung professionally, especially given the wine's substantial cost, but her genuine appreciation for his service felt more valuable than monetary compensation. Most wealthy patrons treated servers as invisible fixtures, making her direct acknowledgement of his efforts surprisingly meaningful. The contrast between her obvious financial means and her decision to forego tipping created a puzzle that occupied his mind while he completed closing duties. As the last customers departed and fellow servers began their cleaning routines, Marcus tackled his assigned tables with mechanical efficiency. He stacked dirty plates, folded linens, and wiped down surfaces while replaying conversations from the evening. The blonde woman's intense observation of restaurant operations seemed too deliberate for casual curiosity, suggesting purposes beyond simple dining. Her questions about service standards and staff training had been subtle but probing, as if she were conducting some form of evaluation rather than enjoying a leisurely meal. Table 7 required the most attention, with wine glasses that needed careful handling and surfaces that showed watermarks from the woman's damp coat. Marcus lifted the heavy dinner plate that had held her barely touched entree, preparing to carry it to the dishwashing station. Something white caught his eye against the dark mahogany surface, a piece of paper folded precisely in half and positioned where the plate had been. His heart rate quickened as he unfolded the note, revealing elegant handwriting that matched the signature on her credit card receipt. The message was brief but compelling. "If you have the courage to change your life, meet me at this address tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring nothing but your dreams." Below the invitation was printed the address for Meridian Tower, the gleaming skyscraper that dominated the city's financial district. Marcus recognized the building as headquarters for several major investment firms, the kind of place where fortunes were made and lost with single phone calls. His hands trembled slightly as he reread the note, wondering if this represented opportunity or elaborate prank from someone with questionable motives. Standing alone in the empty restaurant with rain still drumming against the windows, Marcus felt the weight of possibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy coat. The woman's mysterious behavior now made sense. She had been evaluating him throughout the evening, testing his character through careful observation of his interactions. But evaluation for what purpose? The note offered no explanation of her identity or intentions, leaving him with more questions than answers about this unexpected turn in his carefully structured life. Marcus folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his uniform pocket, his mind racing through implications of tomorrow's potential meeting. Meridian Tower represented everything he had never dared dream of accessing: power, wealth, and opportunities that existed far beyond his current circumstances. Yet something about the woman's demeanor suggested authenticity rather than deception, a quality he had learned to recognize during years of reading difficult customers. Her genuine interest in his service style and professional capabilities hinted at possibilities he barely allowed himself to imagine. The bus ride home through rain-soaked streets gave Marcus time to process the evening's unexpected development. Other passengers dozed or stared at their phones while he contemplated whether courage meant taking risks or protecting the stability he had worked so hard to achieve. Zoe was already asleep when he arrived home, her mathematics homework completed and placed neatly on the kitchen table beside a drawing she had made of their family. The simple sketch showed two figures holding hands under a rainbow with "I love you, Daddy," written in careful cursive below the colorful arc. Sitting at their small kitchen table with the mysterious note spread before him, Marcus weighed his limited options against unlimited possibilities. Tomorrow's decision could change everything or lead nowhere, but either outcome required courage he wasn't certain he possessed. The woman had chosen her words carefully. Bringing dreams rather than practical concerns suggested she understood the leap of faith her invitation required. As rain continued pattering against their apartment's single window, Marcus prepared for a sleepless night contemplating whether some opportunities were too dangerous to ignore. Marcus stood before the gleaming entrance of Meridian Tower at 7:45 in the morning, his best dress shirt pressed to perfection beneath his only suit jacket. The building stretched impossibly high above him, its glass and steel facade reflecting the early sunlight like a monument to ambition and achievement. Security guards in crisp uniforms monitored every person entering the lobby, their scrutinizing gazes making Marcus acutely aware of how his appearance might mark him as someone who didn't belong in this rarefied atmosphere. He had left Zoe with Mrs. Henderson, their elderly neighbor who often helped with childcare emergencies, explaining only that he had an important appointment that could change their circumstances. The lobby's marble floors echoed with the confident footsteps of executives and financial professionals, beginning another day of high-stakes decision-making. Marcus approached the security desk where a stern-faced guard reviewed his identification with professional skepticism. "I'm here to see someone in the building, but I don't have a specific office number," Marcus explained, producing the handwritten note as evidence of his legitimate purpose. The guard examined the paper carefully, his expression shifting from suspicion to surprise as he recognized the letterhead embossed at the bottom. "Take elevator bank C to the 62nd floor," the guard instructed, his tone noticeably more respectful as he handed back the note and Marcus's identification. "Someone will meet you there." Marcus thanked him and walked toward the designated elevators, passing beneath crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than his annual salary. The elevator's ascent felt like traveling to another world entirely. Each floor representing levels of society he had only glimpsed through serving wealthy restaurant patrons who discussed their business dealings as if he were invisible furniture. The 62nd floor opened into an executive reception area where floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city sprawling below. A professionally dressed receptionist looked up from her computer screen with a warm smile that seemed genuinely welcoming rather than the polite mask Marcus usually encountered in upscale environments. "You must be Marcus Washington," she said, rising from her desk with practiced elegance. "Ms. Meridian is expecting you in the conference room. Would you like some coffee or water before your meeting?" Marcus accepted the offered water, grateful for something to occupy his hands as nervous energy coursed through his system. The receptionist led him down a hallway lined with expensive artwork and photographs of corporate achievements, pausing before heavy wooden doors that opened into a conference room dominated by a massive table and wall-mounted screens displaying financial data. The blonde woman from the restaurant sat at the far end of the table, but now she wore an impeccably tailored business suit that transformed her from mysterious diner into obvious executive authority. "Please, sit wherever you're comfortable," she said, gesturing toward the chairs surrounding the polished table. "I'm Victoria Meridian, and I apologize for the dramatic way we met last night. I wanted to observe you in your natural work environment before making this offer." Her directness was refreshing after a morning of wondering about her identity and motivations. Marcus chose a seat halfway down the table, maintaining respectful distance while positioning himself to make direct eye contact during their conversation. Victoria opened a leather portfolio and withdrew several documents, arranging them methodically before beginning her explanation. "I've been watching your performance at the Golden Oak for 3 months, Marcus. Not just your technical skills, which are exemplary, but how you treat every customer with dignity regardless of how they treat you. Last night confirmed what I already suspected. You have natural leadership qualities that are being wasted in your current position." Her words carried conviction that made Marcus straighten unconsciously, pride battling with disbelief as she outlined observations he hadn't realized anyone was making. "I'm developing a new restaurant concept," Victoria continued, sliding a business plan across the table toward him. "Not another upscale establishment for wealthy clients, but a chain focused on exceptional service at accessible prices, quality food, professional atmosphere, and staff who are treated as valuable assets rather than replaceable components. The first location will open in 6 months, and I need someone to oversee operations from day one through expansion." Marcus scanned the document, noting projected revenues and employee benefit packages that seemed too generous to be realistic in the competitive food service industry. The offer she outlined challenged everything Marcus thought he understood about career possibilities for someone with his background and experience. Victoria proposed enrolling him in an executive MBA program designed for working professionals, with full tuition coverage plus a living stipend that would allow him to focus on studies without maintaining multiple jobs. His starting salary as general manager would be 5 times his current income, with performance bonuses and equity participation that could provide long-term financial security for himself and Zoe. "Why me?" Marcus asked, the question that had been building since he first read her note. "You could recruit experienced managers from established restaurant groups, people with formal business education and proven track records in management positions. I'm grateful for this opportunity, but I need to understand what you see in someone whose highest achievement is memorizing wine pairings and maintaining customer satisfaction ratings." His honesty felt risky, but Victoria's evaluation of his character suggested she valued authenticity over false confidence. Victoria leaned back in her chair, considering her response carefully before speaking. "Because most experienced managers have learned to view employees as cost centers rather than human beings. You've never had the luxury of treating people poorly, so you've developed genuine empathy and communication skills that can't be taught in business school. The restaurant industry has a terrible reputation for employee turnover and workplace toxicity. I want to prove that treating staff well creates better customer experiences and stronger financial performance." Her explanation resonated with Marcus's own observations about management practices he had witnessed throughout his service career. The conversation shifted toward practical concerns as Victoria outlined the timeline for his transition into management responsibilities. The MBA program would require 3 evenings per week, plus weekend seminars, a significant time commitment that would reduce his availability for Zoe's daily needs. Victoria addressed this concern by offering to arrange tutoring and after-school care through the company's employee assistance program, ensuring that Zoe's academic performance wouldn't suffer due to her father's increased professional obligations. "What about my current employment?" Marcus inquired, recognizing that leaving the Golden Oak would burn bridges he might need if this opportunity proved unsuccessful. "I've been there for 3 years, and while the work isn't ideal, it provides steady income and health insurance that I can't afford to lose without guaranteed replacement." Victoria nodded approvingly at his practical considerations, appreciating his reluctance to make impulsive decisions that could jeopardize his daughter's welfare. "I understand your caution completely," she replied, producing an employment contract from her portfolio. "This document guarantees your position for a minimum of 2 years, with health insurance beginning immediately and a signing bonus equivalent to 6 months of your current salary. If you decide this isn't working for either of us during the first 90 days, you'll receive severance pay and positive recommendations for positions at comparable restaurants." The terms seemed almost too favorable to believe, making Marcus wonder if there were hidden conditions or expectations not yet disclosed. Victoria stood and moved to the window wall, gazing out at the cityscape while allowing Marcus time to process her offer without feeling pressured for immediate response. "I built this company from nothing, Marcus. I understand what it's like to work multiple jobs just to survive, to worry constantly about providing for family members who depend on you. Success gave me resources, but it also taught me that financial achievement means nothing without opportunities to help others reach their potential." Her personal revelation added depth to what had seemed like a purely business transaction. The weight of decision settled heavily on Marcus's shoulders as he reviewed the contract terms one final time. This opportunity represented everything he had dreamed of providing for Zoe: educational advantages, financial security, and social mobility that could transform her future possibilities. Yet accepting would require abandoning the careful stability he had constructed since Sarah's death, trading known challenges for unknown risks that could either elevate their circumstances or destroy the modest progress they had achieved. "I need to discuss this with someone who can help me understand the legal implications," Marcus said finally, recognizing that such a significant decision required more consideration than Victoria's presence would allow. "And I want to explain the situation to my daughter before making commitments that will affect her daily routine. Can you give me 48 hours to provide a definitive answer?" His request for time demonstrated the careful decision-making approach that had initially attracted Victoria's attention. Victoria extended her hand for a firm handshake that felt like sealing a partnership rather than concluding a job interview. "Take all the time you need, Marcus. Good decisions shouldn't be rushed, especially ones that affect family welfare. I'll have my assistant provide contact information so you can reach me with any additional questions before making your choice." As Marcus gathered the documents and prepared to leave, he felt simultaneously overwhelmed by possibility and terrified by the magnitude of change Victoria's offer represented for his carefully ordered existence. The elevator descent seemed much faster than his morning ascent, carrying him back toward familiar ground where he could process this unexpected development. Stepping outside Meridian Tower into bright afternoon sunlight, Marcus realized that regardless of his ultimate decision, this morning had fundamentally altered his perception of what might be achievable with courage, preparation, and someone willing to take a chance on untested potential. The walk to the bus stop gave him time to begin planning conversations with Zoe and Mrs. Henderson about changes that could reshape their modest lives in ways he was only beginning to imagine. 3 months into his new role as general manager of Meridian Bistro's flagship location, Marcus stood in the restaurant's kitchen at 5 in the morning, reviewing inventory reports while the first delivery trucks rumbled through the alley outside. The transition from server to executive had proven more challenging than Victoria's optimistic projections suggested, requiring him to master financial planning, staff scheduling, and vendor negotiations while simultaneously attending evening MBA classes 3 nights per week. His body ached from the constant juggling act between his professional responsibilities and parental duties, but the steady progress in both areas sustained his determination to succeed. The restaurant's opening month had exceeded revenue expectations, drawing positive reviews from food critics and generating the kind of word-of-mouth publicity that established restaurants spent years trying to cultivate. Marcus took particular pride in the employee satisfaction surveys that showed unprecedented retention rates and job satisfaction scores, validating Victoria's theory that treating staff well would translate into superior customer service. However, recent developments had begun testing both his management skills and his faith in the principles that had guided their initial success. Chef Raymond Dubois, the culinary professional Victoria had recruited from a prestigious Manhattan restaurant, had initially impressed Marcus with his innovative menu concepts and technical expertise in the kitchen. However, subtle inconsistencies in food costs and inventory levels had prompted Marcus to investigate purchasing patterns that seemed disconnected from actual menu sales. His discovery of discrepancies between delivered supplies and recorded receipts suggested systematic theft. But confronting a senior staff member about potential embezzlement would require diplomatic skills his business school courses hadn't yet addressed. The morning prep session proceeded normally as line cooks arrived and began their familiar routines of chopping vegetables, preparing sauces, and organizing stations for the lunch rush ahead. Marcus observed their interactions with Chef Dubois, noting the professional respect they showed for his culinary knowledge while remaining alert for signs of complicity in any fraudulent activities. The kitchen staff seemed genuinely unaware of any irregularities, their focus remaining on food quality and customer satisfaction rather than the financial manipulation that was slowly draining restaurant profits. Marcus's investigation had revealed a pattern of inflated invoices from specific suppliers, with Chef Dubois apparently receiving kickbacks for approving purchases at prices significantly above market rates. The scheme was sophisticated enough to avoid detection during casual financial reviews, but Marcus's careful analysis of cost-per-plate calculations had revealed margins that made profitability impossible to sustain. Confronting this situation would require evidence that could withstand legal scrutiny, but gathering such proof without alerting the perpetrator demanded investigative skills Marcus was developing through trial and error. The lunch service began smoothly, with servers moving efficiently between tables and kitchen staff maintaining the high standards that had earned their early reputation for excellence. Marcus circulated through the dining room, greeting regular customers and monitoring service quality while mentally rehearsing his planned confrontation with Chef Dubois. The evidence he had compiled over the past week painted a clear picture of systematic fraud, but his lack of experience with personnel conflicts left him uncertain about the most effective approach for resolving this crisis without disrupting restaurant operations. At 2 o'clock, during the brief lull between lunch and dinner services, Marcus requested a private meeting with Chef Dubois in his office. The culinary professional entered with characteristic confidence, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk with the casual authority of someone accustomed to being the most knowledgeable person in any kitchen-related discussion. Marcus spread the financial documents across his desk, allowing the evidence to speak before he voiced his accusations about theft and vendor manipulation. "These invoices don't match market pricing for comparable ingredients," Marcus began, pointing to highlighted discrepancies that revealed the scope of the chef's fraudulent activities. "Our food costs are running 30% above projections, and these specific suppliers seem to be charging premium rates for standard products. I need you to explain how these purchases were justified and why you approved payments that are bankrupting this restaurant." His direct approach reflected lessons learned from Victoria about addressing problems immediately rather than allowing them to compound through delayed action. Chef Dubois's initial response combined indignation with technical explanations about ingredient quality and seasonal pricing variations that might justify the apparent overcharges. However, Marcus had prepared for such deflections by researching industry standards and comparing their costs with other restaurants using similar suppliers. The chef's explanations grew increasingly defensive as Marcus presented evidence of the systematic nature of the overcharges, culminating in bank records that showed payments to a consulting company owned by Chef Dubois's brother-in-law. "You're accusing me of theft without understanding the complexities of professional kitchen management," Chef Dubois declared, his voice rising with theatrical outrage designed to intimidate Marcus into backing down from his investigation. "I've been running successful kitchens longer than you've been in this business. These accusations are insulting and demonstrate exactly why servers should stick to taking orders instead of pretending they understand restaurant finance." The personal attack revealed both the chef's guilt and his assumption that Marcus would retreat rather than escalate the confrontation. Marcus remained calm despite the provocation, recognizing the chef's strategy of using professional intimidation to avoid accountability for his criminal activities. "The evidence speaks for itself, Raymond. Whether you've been in this business for 5 years or 50 years, doesn't change the fact that you've been stealing from this restaurant and betraying the trust that Victoria placed in both of us. You have 2 choices: resign immediately with a neutral reference, or face criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud." His ultimatum reflected the decisive leadership style he was developing through necessity rather than formal training. The confrontation escalated when Chef Dubois attempted to rally kitchen staff support by portraying Marcus's accusations as racially motivated attacks on his professional competence. However, the financial evidence was too comprehensive to dismiss, and the other kitchen employees had witnessed enough suspicious behavior to recognize the validity of Marcus's concerns. Within 2 hours, Chef Dubois had cleared out his personal belongings and departed, leaving Marcus to manage dinner service without a head chef and with a kitchen staff suddenly uncertain about their job security. The crisis deepened when Victoria arrived for an unscheduled inspection, just as the evening rush was beginning, with a skeleton crew trying to maintain service standards without their primary culinary leader. Marcus had no choice but to step into the kitchen himself, drawing on his years of restaurant experience to coordinate meal preparation while simultaneously managing front-of-house operations. The next 4 hours tested every leadership skill he had developed, requiring split-second decisions about menu modifications, staff assignments, and customer service recovery when order delays threatened to undermine their reputation. Working alongside the line cooks, Marcus discovered capabilities he hadn't known he possessed, translating his years of observing kitchen operations into practical cooking skills that enabled him to fill the gap left by Chef Dubois's departure. His willingness to work beside hourly employees, rather than merely issuing directives from management positions, earned immediate respect from staff members who had questioned whether a former server could effectively lead restaurant operations. The evening concluded successfully despite the chaos, with customer satisfaction remaining high and kitchen morale actually improving without the toxic influence of their former head chef. Victoria's presence during the crisis provided an opportunity for Marcus to demonstrate his problem-solving abilities under extreme pressure while explaining the financial irregularities that had prompted Chef Dubois' dismissal. Her reaction combined disappointment about the embezzlement with admiration for Marcus's thorough investigation and decisive action to protect restaurant profitability. "You handled this exactly as I would have hoped," she told him as they reviewed the evening's receipts and staff feedback. Crisis management reveals character more clearly than routine operations ever could. The following weeks brought new challenges as Marcus worked to recruit replacement kitchen leadership while maintaining the culinary standards that had established their reputation. His MBA coursework suddenly became directly applicable to real-world problems, providing theoretical frameworks for understanding personnel management, financial controls, and operational efficiency that he could implement immediately. The combination of academic learning and practical application accelerated his professional development in ways that classroom instruction alone could never achieve. Balancing these intensified work responsibilities with Zoe's needs required careful time management that left Marcus exhausted but determined to succeed. His daughter had adapted well to their changed circumstances, thriving in the after-school program Victoria's company provided while taking pride in her father's professional advancement. However, when Zoe developed flu symptoms during his busiest week of chef recruitment, Marcus faced the impossible choice between attending a critical business meeting and caring for his sick child. The decision to prioritize Zoe's needs over professional obligations felt both natural and terrifying, given how much their future depended on his success in this management role. Marcus called Victoria to explain his absence from the scheduled meeting with potential chef candidates, expecting disappointment or criticism about his commitment to the business. Instead, she rescheduled the interviews and arranged for a company physician to check on Zoe, demonstrating the family-supportive culture she had promised during their initial negotiations. Sitting in Zoe's bedroom that evening, watching her sleep peacefully after receiving proper medical attention, Marcus reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed since that rainy night when he discovered Victoria's mysterious note. The challenges were greater than anything he had previously faced, but so were the rewards and opportunities for growth. Every crisis survived strengthened his confidence that he could handle whatever obstacles lay ahead, while every success validated Victoria's faith in his potential for leadership. The new head chef Marcus ultimately hired proved to be a perfect cultural fit for their employee-centered approach to restaurant management. Maria Santos brought both technical expertise and collaborative leadership style that elevated kitchen morale while maintaining the high culinary standards their customers expected. Her hiring marked a turning point in restaurant operations, establishing the stable foundation Marcus needed to focus on expansion planning and long-term strategic development that would define their future success. As the fourth month of operations concluded with record-breaking profits and industry recognition for innovative employee practices, Marcus realized he had not merely accepted a job offer, but had discovered a career path that aligned his personal values with professional ambitions. The scared single father who had entered Meridian Tower months earlier had evolved into a confident executive capable of making difficult decisions under pressure while maintaining the integrity that had originally attracted Victoria's attention. The transformation felt both dramatic and natural, as if he were finally becoming the person he had always been meant to be. 6 months after the chef crisis that had tested his leadership abilities, Marcus stood in the newly furnished office of Meridian Bistro's second location, watching construction crews put finishing touches on what would become their flagship downtown establishment. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating financial reports that showed consistent profitability across their restaurant group and employee satisfaction metrics that had attracted attention from industry publications. His MBA graduation certificate hung on the wall beside a photograph of Zoe receiving an academic achievement award at her new private school. Visual reminders of how far their lives had traveled from that rainy evening when everything changed. The expansion had proceeded ahead of schedule, with investor confidence remaining high as Marcus proved his ability to replicate their successful business model across different locations and market demographics. Victoria had promoted him to Regional Operations Director, overseeing 7 restaurants with plans for 5 additional openings over the next 18 months. Each new establishment followed their proven formula of exceptional employee treatment, translating into superior customer experiences, creating a sustainable competitive advantage that traditional restaurants struggled to match with conventional management approaches. Marcus walked through the dining room of the newest location, inspecting table arrangements and lighting systems while mentally reviewing the extensive checklist that ensured consistent quality across all their properties. His approach to restaurant management had evolved from instinctive customer service into systematic business strategy, incorporating lessons from his MBA coursework with practical wisdom gained through months of hands-on problem-solving. The transformation from server to executive felt complete, though he maintained weekly shifts at each restaurant to stay connected with frontline operations and staff concerns. The afternoon brought a scheduled meeting with potential investors interested in funding their expansion into adjacent metropolitan markets, representing opportunities for growth that would have seemed impossible during his days at the Golden Oak. Marcus reviewed presentation materials that outlined their unique approach to hospitality industry challenges, emphasizing data that proved employee-centered management generated superior financial returns alongside positive workplace culture. These investor meetings had become routine, but he still felt satisfaction in demonstrating how treating people well created measurable business advantages. At 3 o'clock, Marcus drove to Zoe's school for a parent-teacher conference that had been scheduled months in advance. back when such meetings required him to request time off from multiple jobs and arrange complex childcare logistics. The private academy. Victoria's Employee Assistance Program had provided academic opportunities that challenged Zoe's intellectual curiosity while offering extracurricular activities Marcus could never have afforded on his previous salary. His daughter's transformation paralleled his own, as confidence and expanded horizons replaced the cautious optimism that had characterized her earlier years. "Zoe is performing exceptionally well across all subjects," her teacher reported, showing Marcus test scores and project evaluations that confirmed his daughter's academic potential. "She's particularly gifted in mathematics and science, with reasoning abilities that suggest she could pursue advanced placement courses when she reaches high school." Her essay about career aspirations mentioned wanting to help people through business leadership, which seems to reflect positive influences from her home environment. The teacher's comments filled Marcus with pride that extended beyond academic achievement to recognition of values successfully transmitted despite their challenging circumstances. The drive home took them past their old apartment complex, where Marcus occasionally stopped to visit Mrs. Henderson and maintain connections with neighbors who had supported them during difficult times. Today's visit included sharing news about Zoe's academic progress and Marcus's promotion to regional director. Updates that brought tears to the elderly woman's eyes as she recalled the struggling single father who had once worried about affording basic necessities. Such conversations reminded Marcus that success meant more than financial advancement. It represented hope fulfilled and potential realized through determination and opportunity. Their current home occupied a tree-lined street in a neighborhood where children played safely in front yards and parents gathered for weekend barbecues that strengthened community bonds. The house featured 3 bedrooms, a modern kitchen where Marcus enjoyed preparing elaborate breakfasts on Saturday mornings, and a backyard where Zoe practiced soccer skills and tended a small garden they had planted together. The mortgage payments represented a substantial increase from their previous rent, but Marcus's salary growth had made homeownership achievable without the financial stress that had once dominated their daily existence. Evening brought their established routine of homework assistance, followed by dinner conversation about Zoe's school activities and Marcus's business challenges, maintaining the close relationship that had sustained them through years of struggle. Zoe's questions about restaurant management revealed her growing understanding of leadership principles and ethical decision-making, suggesting that his professional development was positively influencing her character formation. These daily discussions had evolved from survival-focused planning into exploration of future possibilities that seemed limitless rather than constrained by economic circumstances. At 8 o'clock, Victoria arrived unexpectedly with champagne and a leather portfolio containing documents that would formalize Marcus's promotion to Vice President of Operations for their entire restaurant group. The title change reflected both his proven capabilities and Victoria's long-term vision for expanding their business model into a national franchise system that could transform hospitality industry standards. The celebration felt both earned and surreal, considering how recently such advancement had seemed completely beyond his reach or imagination. "When I first watched you at the Golden Oak, I saw someone who treated every customer with dignity regardless of how they treated you," Victoria reflected as they reviewed his new employment contract. "That character quality can't be taught in business schools or acquired through management training programs. You've proven that leading with integrity creates better results than any other approach, and now we're going to scale that philosophy across markets where employees desperately need advocates who understand their challenges." Her words validated not just his professional success, but the values that had guided his approach to both work and parenting. The conversation shifted toward future planning, as Victoria outlined expansion strategies that would establish Marcus as a key figure in transforming restaurant industry culture throughout the region. His role would involve training new managers in their employee-centered approach while maintaining operational oversight of existing properties. The position offered equity participation that could provide long-term financial security extending beyond salary increases, creating wealth-building opportunities that would ensure Zoe's educational expenses and future career choices remained unlimited by economic constraints. Later that evening, after Victoria had departed and Zoe had completed her homework, Marcus sat in his home office reviewing business plans and reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment of abundance and possibility. The framed photograph of Sarah on his desk served as a reminder that success felt meaningful primarily because it honored her memory while providing their daughter with opportunities they had dreamed of creating together. His achievements represented not just personal advancement, but fulfillment of promises made during those difficult months when cancer threatened to destroy their family's future. The final ritual of each day involved checking on Zoe as she slept, ensuring her blankets were properly arranged and her school materials prepared for the following morning. Tonight's visit included placing a small wrapped gift on her nightstand, tickets to a science museum exhibition she had mentioned wanting to see, the kind of spontaneous gesture that had once required careful budget planning but now represented simple expressions of love unencumbered by financial anxiety. Her peaceful expression reflected the security and confidence that came from knowing her father's hard work had created stable foundations for whatever dreams she chose to pursue. Standing at the window of their comfortable home, Marcus watched late commuters returning from jobs that might offer them the same transformational opportunities he had discovered through courage and Victoria's willingness to recognize potential in unexpected places. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as restaurant operations expanded and his responsibilities increased, but tonight belonged to gratitude for second chances and faith rewarded. The scared server who had once counted tips to afford groceries had evolved into a confident executive whose success enabled others to find similar paths toward dignity and achievement. Rain began falling softly against the windows, reminiscent of that pivotal evening when everything changed through a mysterious note left beneath a dinner plate. But tonight's precipitation felt like blessing rather than burden, nourishing the dreams they had planted together and watching grow into realities that surpassed their most optimistic expectations. Marcus smiled as he prepared for bed, knowing that tomorrow's opportunities would be met with the same integrity and determination that had carried them from survival to success, one principled decision at a time.